Thank you, everybody who's joining today's session. I'm delighted to be joined by my colleagues who are with me. I'll do an introduction of those guys in a second, but just for everybody's benefit, today's webinar is focused around the idea of using different kind of data disciplines and how they can apply to the idea of building a data house and building, like a building up, whether it's trying to find out how kind of house you want to build, how you want to build it, who's responsible for different things in there. And then eventually, if you ever want to leave that dream house and move to a different data house, how you go through those things. So I'm going to be your host today. I'm Elliot Clarkson. I'm the Vice President of Global Marketing here at Amplify. I'm joined by Chris Collier, who is our Chief Technology Officer. Hi, Chris. Chris is also, there's two things about Chris is also feeling very sick today, so I'm going to take some sympathy on him and not drill him too much today. But we also, Chris, we're talking about building a data house. Chris is actually having some work done on his house at the moment, some construction done. So if you hear some banging, we are quite literally building a data house today. I'm also joined by Aaron Chanda, who's our VP of Data Management. Aaron actually moved house yesterday, so there's lots of house analogies already happening here. And I'm also joined by Mike Evans, who's our Chief Innovation Officer, who is also in a house. So Mike, welcome as well. Unless you're doing this webinar from somewhere that isn't your house. I don't know, you might be.
It's definitely a house, I can confirm.
Excellent. For those of you who don't know Amplify or are new to us, I'll just give a quick introduction. So we are the go-to consultancy for any enterprise organizations like yours that want their success to be driven by data. The way we go about business is we want to try and empower our customers rather than do it for them. It's about empowering our customers to kind of innovate, grow, and succeed by establishing and delivering strategies across all elements of the data value chain. So whether it's governance and management of data through to things like having proper decision intelligence and automation, we've got a really integrated approach to modern data architecture that's going to deliver measurable results through the combination of our expert consultancy and also through the partnerships we have with some of the leading market-leading technology partners we have as well. So that's kind of who we are, and that's why we're talking about this stuff today. So guys, if you're happy, I'm going to get started with this. So as I said, the kind of theme of the webinar is building a house, and I guess with any house you have to kind of start with the foundation. And people, this is something that tends to be, I think, a common misconception in the market, is that data governance is kind of seen as the foundation of a data house. But that's not necessarily true. Like, if anything, kind of overall good data management is the foundation. Data governance has a much wider role in the building and maintenance of your data house. So, I mean, Chris, what's your opinion and thoughts on the foundational aspects of it?
Yeah, and really appreciate you asking me, because of the group here, I'm probably the most antagonistic when it comes to data governance. It was a lesson learned through a lot of hardships on what the value is. So if you're watching this webinar and you already realize the value of it, then I'm probably not preaching directly to you. However, if you're watching this and you haven't realized the value of it, I think for me, data governance, trying to figure out like where it fit. I did plenty of projects, a lot of success, never really truly understanding or implementing data governance. And I can remember there was a time where we were working with an organization and they just wanted us to tell them how to make things right. And they wanted us to be able to put numbers to paper and tell them on how, like, what does right look like? What are the requirements to be right? And it was a very difficult question to understand without knowing some baseline. And so when I think of data governance as a foundation, what I realized is that it's foundational from a data journey, like that definition of foundation, but it's not foundational from like the house perspective. Mm-hmm. I think data governance starts long before you are ever clearing out where you're going to put your foundation. So if I'm going to be a pedant and talk about the house building analogy for data governance, it's going to be like building codes. I mean, it's, Elliot mentioned, I've got work going on outside my window. We're rebuilding our deck. It was in it was in a dangerous state. It was unfit for use. And so we needed to rebuild the deck. Well, before we even start working on the deck, before we even get to the point of designing it or anything, we have to understand what is required from supports, what are required for spans and joists and beams, how high do the rails have to be so that it's compliant, how long do the stairs have to be based on the height that it is so that we don't have our stairs be too steep. So there's all sorts of details which the city, the state, the county would determine like this is a fit building, before we ever had an opportunity to design what good was. So like that definition of good and really understanding good, that's kind of data governance on its outset. So when I'm talking to a customer, we need to understand those definitions, and that, building codes. If you're building my deck or my neighbor's deck, yes, that's kind of shared. But when you go organization to organization, I have a homeowners association, so covenants. All the houses in my neighborhood have agreed to certain restrictions in how we do construction. Well, that is kind of like when we go organization to organization. Good data governance, good decks. That definition changes when I go across the street. So there's a lot of context that we have to understand before we ever break ground. Now, once we've done that, then you start getting into the foundation, like the actual foundation in the analogy. But that for me is where data governance starts. It starts with really understanding what good means to you, your organization, and then in our building analogy, what good means to have an actual livable, safe place that I want my kids to be playing in.
Right. I can see lots of nodding heads going around. So Aaron, I mean, you've been involved in lots of, data governance-led projects in your role. And I think, using this analogy of a house, I'm sure you've got some other examples of where you see data governance being something that's not necessarily, in all cases, either like a big thing. It can sometimes be, a kind of a more micro thing than a big macro thing.
Yeah, and I think if we continue the analogy that Chris started, Chris talks a lot about the starts, the foundations, and the building codes and the regulations and the compliance, which is all absolutely correct and important. Tracing that through once you've built your house and you're living in your house, I think we have to remember that good governance is critical for ongoing management and maintenance. In a household, you might have somebody that is on point for the weekly clean, and you know who that is and what they're doing and what that will look like. When you need to service your boiler, you'll bring a supplier in to help you do that, who's got the right skills and expertise that they can sign that off and go, right, your boiler is fit for another year. Maybe someone else is going to do the weekly food shop so that everybody can eat and stay healthy and that sort of stuff. And I think that governance is similar. You need to know your roles and responsibilities that you are defining for all those activities that you need to do around your house or around your system, and what good looks like. And the other part for me as well is it's about what are the extra things that you might need to do to preserve the value of your home. So if, for example, you are leaking energy and it's costing you, loads of money every month, because it's just not very well insulated, that operationally, as you live in that house, that's a big expense and it's going to, set you back. You might want to decide that you're going to build some insulation somewhere, which is a kind of a one-off investment that is effectively going to reduce your expenses, make your home more efficient, and in the long term, it's going to increase the value of your home. And I think the same thing, the same parallels are there with governance. If you've got a system that's got dirty data in it and you want to build a data quality firewall to stop bad data getting in, or build kind of good processes that change how your system is governed, all of that will help kind of, effectively increase the value of the data and information held within it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I love that that talk about maintenance there, Aaron, because the trials of having to replace our deck. It's because the wood was rotted. The wood was rotted because it was absorbing moisture. It's in direct sunlight. And it was, we were not doing the proper annual maintenance on it. And so talking to our general contractor, and he's talking about, every year come fall, power wash it, and then re-water seal it. And just this normal, 1 weekend's worth of work, and we wouldn't be spending thousands of dollars on replacing it. And so you're right, knowing when and what to do, and what that process is of upkeep, it would have saved significant amounts of effort. So I love that analogy.
I love how people are probably going to think this is like a staged conversation. You're not actually having your deck done, but I can genuinely feel your passion and anger towards this deck.
Have you seen lumber prices, Elliot?
Mike, is there anything you'd add to the data governance analogy conversation?
Well, I think both Chris and Aaron have alluded to it, but certainly when we talk about roles and responsibilities, we've got to think not only about kind of designing something, maintaining something, but also about like decisions that may need to be made about in this case the house. So who's going to be actually responsible if we need to change something? Maybe we need to change something because something unexpected's happened to the house, or maybe we need to change something because we want to extend the house. Our needs have changed. There's got to be a clear framework for who's able to make that kind of decision, and really sign off on that. And the same is very, very true in the data world as well. Making changes to your systems can have broad impacts, and it's important that people have an understanding of those impacts, and that the right decision makers are in the room to make those decisions. I'd probably also add as well, it's really important that we understand all of the different bits of the house and what they're for, what they do, how to maintain them. If we don't know where the main switch for the electricity is, or for the water, that's going to cause us problems, right? If we don't have instructions for the main appliances, that's going to cause us problems too. So it's really important that we've got all of that sort of inventory of information about the house that we've built as well, and of course the same is true for our data.
I'm sure.
I think there's also something in this around the kind of, sorry Chris, the kind of culture as well, right? Is if you've got a team of people, if like to Aaron's example, if you've got a list of like who's responsible for what in the house, who knows where this is, who knows where that is. If you're constantly saying to the person who isn't responsible for taking the trash out, why didn't you take the trash out? They're going to be like, it's not my job. Like, and it creates a poor culture. Whereas if everybody has their defined roles, then the culture and the people who are living in that house are going to be a lot more harmonious and be able to like live together and exist together and keep the house in order.
Yeah, and that's really just, it's always, for us, it's always an exercise of aligning expectations. What is everybody's role? What are they doing to serve the rest of the organization? And as long as expectations are in alignment, then people generally are going to be satisfied. And when that doesn't happen, then people are dissatisfied, which isn't to say we're trying to build a rigid model that this is the way things will be forever, but it's, hey, let's come up with a model that we agree works for now. And if anybody has a challenge to it, then that same group can decide on how to react to it.
Yeah.
So
agreed. No, definitely. Well, I think it's a really good discussion. I think it definitely, the idea of data governance as a foundation, I think you guys there have really clearly explained how data governance plays a bigger role. And I think especially, so kind of moving this on, I think when we look at moving away from data governance is once you know what house you're building and you do have the foundations, you obviously need, once you want to build the house, you need blueprints, you need an architect to put together a clear plan of how that's going to happen. And that's the kind of thing where having a clear data strategy comes into play, right? And then you want to build the house, you want to put the house in place and you want to actually get the bricks in, right? And that's the things like implementation. So whether you're talking about putting in place a PIM system or an MDM platform or something, right? You're going to have to build that house eventually. Once you have that house built and once it's well governed and everyone has their roles, I think the piece that for me then becomes important is going to be you keep that house in shape, right? So we've talked already about some of that stuff around, whether it's a big job like replacing a deck or whether it's taking the trash out, whatever, or however it is. There are lots of big and small jobs. And I think that's where, an element of governance plays on that. But then there's also the element of like actual data quality and keeping the house in order. So sometimes it is a big investment, sometimes it's a small one, but they're all going to make sure that house stays livable for the long term. So Aaron, again, I know you've been involved in lots of engagements where data quality plays a big role in those. What's your thoughts in terms of, how data quality plays a role in keeping your data house livable?
Yeah, I think the big and small thing that you said there is really key. So, look, how often do we all get into bad habits in our homes where things pile up, right? You're feeling lazy, dishes pile up in the sink, clothes are dumped in a pile over there in the corner. And sometimes, those two pile up issues are not that difficult to solve, but sometimes when you leave a problem to get worse and worse, it makes the big cleanup harder, right? If you don't address mold or rust or these things, then they tend to spread. And that makes your cleanup of that a much costlier kind of endeavor to sort of fix. So, I think for me, good data quality is about keeping on top of your data. So Chris mentioned when he neglected something, he had a big annual bill to then fix it. Well, data quality is about using the most knowledgeable people at the right time with some good process and some good technology to kind of stay on top of these things. And sometimes, you have to do it. You have to do a big cleanup. You have to split your house into rooms. You know who's responsible for which room, and you go and tell them what they need to do, and then they go and do it. And they have, and when they're doing that, they're asking themselves the question: do I really need this, or can I bin it? It's the same with data. If you haven't used your data in a while, if it's just gathering dust, then get rid of it. Sometimes it just needs a bit of a clean. Sometimes you have to put something in the right place. Sometimes something you find isn't yours, and you have to ask somebody else, "Hey, what is this for? Do we need it? Where can I put it?" And that job is much easier done if you can collect all of that stuff in one place and kind of have a single decision maker. So yeah, as I say, sometimes it's a big kind of spring clean of just getting your house in order, and sometimes it's a keeping on top of things on a weekly basis, right? If you hoover dirt and dust every week, then your house will always be clean. And that's the right kind of message that we want to be giving our clients when it comes to data quality. If you have good processes, good technologies, good rules, you can keep on top of your data and information, and ultimately give people confidence that it's in a good state.
Absolutely. It's interesting as well about splitting the house up into different rooms. And I mean, I know we do anyway, but I mean, that could be almost like you're splitting up like your customer data and your product data. It's all the different domains you have, right? That's that kind of different people being responsible for keeping different things clean. Again, that's where the governance kind of stuff comes in as well. But
absolutely, it's about roles, responsibilities, and how you use those roles. If you've defined somebody as being the expert of a certain data set, then they know what good looks like. So you give them that responsibility and give them the tools and processes for them to do that job.
Right.
I'm chuckling because last week we told her, I have two girls, and my youngest 4-year-old told her she needed to clean up her room because she didn't get the toys off the floor, then they would get vacuumed up. And she understood, yes, okay, Daddy. And she was cleaning her room, and we came in like 45 minutes later, and she had every single thing in her room piled up on her bed. So by the strictest definition, we absolutely could hoover the floor. However, I think her room actually looked worse. So having a good definition and having some expectations there would definitely be key for a good quality execution.
And you might want to, extending that story a bit further, you might want to, assign KPIs or performance metrics against that. So actually, you might say to her, if you do this amount of cleaning or you get rid of this amount of stuff, and we don't see it piled on your bed, then your allowance is going to be, $5 or whatever it is that you're going to give. And it's the same with organizations. You have to tie a metric or a measure to your data quality board. If I sort this bit of data out, why am I going to spend 2 weeks looking at this issue? Well, you are, because the net result of that is the rest of your day job is made 5 times easier because you haven't got to worry about A, B, and C. So I think if we can tie performance measures and metrics to what we're asking people to do, the chance of it sticking is much higher.
Yeah, and on the flip side, that's the result you get from it as well, right? Is if you pick up your toys off the floor, they're not going to get hoovered, which means you can play later, and it's kind of like that's the outcome that they're looking for, right? There's all the outcomes that come from having those things in place.
But to that end, Aaron, you just leaning in on this example, I mean, for real, one of the things we realized, she had too many books in her room. And so we realized that we had insufficient storage space. And so it actually necessitated my wife and I to go buy a bookshelf to put in her room so that she then had a place to clean up her books instead of just piles of books on the floor. So we actually changed the definition of good quality by now saying, okay, you can put your books here instead of just piling them up.
Yeah.
It's really important. It's really important as well to not, not put too much focus on trying to keep everything perfect. There's certain elements of a house that will perhaps always get dirty, or perhaps you don't use them very much, and it's not not so important that they're always brilliantly clean and tidy. And you've only got a finite amount of effort that you can perhaps apply. So it's important to kind of keep on top of the things that really matter to you and that really make the house work for you.
Like,
and the same is really true in data. Sorry, Chris.
I said you're talking about the cobwebs in the ceiling of my basement.
Yeah, absolutely. And behind me, that's where I've got my camera on blur. You can't see that I haven't bothered to clean in here, but it's really important, and the same in data. Like, organizations can end up investing quite a lot of money in keeping data clean, almost for the sake of keeping it clean, when there isn't actually much business use of that data. So it's all about deciding what's appropriate and investing your effort in the right place.
But it makes it livable as well, right? It's like if you get home from a long day at work and you want to sit on the couch and watch TV, if someone's saying to you, you can't sit on the couch because it's perfectly clean and like the cushions are all like, you know, where they are, like, then it's not livable. It's not something where you can actually go and relax and you can actually,
Totally.
you know, live in that data house. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, and when we have company coming over, we make the living space. We spend our effort there, but we just close the bedroom doors. So to Mike's point, we focus in our quality efforts on the things that are going to have immediate impact and real impact.
Yeah, prioritization, right? So, no, I like it. I think that's a really good. Who knew you could squeeze so many analogies out of the house example? I love this. So we're going to go for a final one here. So if you get sick of your data house, right, and you to use like the love it or list it example, if you decide to list your house and move, if you want to move to a new data house, that's where things like data migration come in, right? Where it's taking what you have with you and moving it to a new place. And I think there's obviously lots to consider with that too, because, I think you could look at why are you moving, right? So Mike, I mean, you've been involved in lots of data migration projects and have a good feel for this. So where would you start with something like a data migration in this house analogy?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Elliot, with the asking that question, why are you moving in the first place? So if you're moving house, there's generally a reason for it. Maybe you want to just be in a different location. That's a perfectly reasonable reason to move. But also it might be that you're trying to get more space from your new house, either a bigger garden or more rooms or more bedrooms or whatever. Or it might be that you're downsizing, trying to save money, trying to get a house that's a bit more, easy to maintain and easy to keep on top of. So really nailing down what you want from your new house, and then planning how you move things and what you move based on what you're trying to get. So for example, if you're moving to a bigger place, if you're moving to a bigger house, do you just really want to like replicate everything you've got? You might not have enough furniture to fill your new house. The furniture that you have might not look right or be right for the rooms that you have in the new house. It might, the color schemes and things, you might want to change them. There's all sorts of things so that the furniture that you have in your existing house and the things that you have in your existing house might not be quite right for the house that you're moving to. And in those cases, you've got to think about, well, what am I going to do with that furniture or those things? Maybe I'm going to keep some of it and use it in certain rooms. Maybe I'm going to get rid of some of it. Maybe some of it's just not appropriate to move, and I don't want to keep it anymore. Maybe there's some things that I can't fit in, but I do want to keep them. So maybe I want to store them somewhere else that's not in the house for future reference in case I need them. So yeah, it's really important that we're not just thinking that we'll just pick up and move everything as it is, because like to all the points about data quality, we don't. If one of the reasons that we're moving is we're not happy with where we are and the environment that we're in, we don't want to just replicate that environment necessarily in the place that we're moving to.
Yeah, I really like that, Mike, and I think the why. Like I love, Elliot said it, you said it, like, and I love the emphasis on making sure we're asking why. I know. My wife absolutely has a sense of style and fashion. I absolutely do not. I'm very much a utilitarian guy. And but what I notice is, as we live in a place, we've lived in 2 places now since we've been married, and we buy furniture to fill the space, to fill the needs, to fit the decor. The curtains, the hardwood floors here, the crown molding on the vaulted ceilings in the townhouse or whatever. But then we moved to a new house, and the stuff that we had that did fill the space, to your point, maybe it does fill the space, maybe it doesn't fill the space, but maybe the decor is different. Maybe like there's just, the now we went from this modern decor on the built-ins to this, shabby chic, whatever. And, then it challenged, I was fine with it. We had a couch, but we were couch shopping within a year because it just didn't work anymore. And so, yeah, I think that why of like, you can't just, one of the cardinal sins is when I'm talking to a customer is when you ask them a question on why they do something and they say, well, because we do. And it's always like, no, that is like the one answer you can't give me. There are plenty of reasons you do it the way you do it, but because it is the way you do it is not one of them. And so I do think getting into that why is so critical. Go ahead, Aaron.
I think yeah, no, you just reminded me, like you like the stuff that you and Mike have been saying. I mean, I'm just going to be the data geek that I am, and the concepts that these things relate to. So as you say, you have stuff in your first house that you don't think are going to meet the needs of your second house. Now, from a data perspective, we will talk about that. If we're talking about two systems, you will talk about that from a migration and mapping perspective. And one of the key activities we would say anybody should do is a mapping exercise of the data entities and objects and attributes that they have in one system. Where is that going to go in your new system? And you have to find a home for things, or you have to say that it's not needed, or you have to transform things, or maybe you need to collect new things. And all of these scenarios are relevant from a migration perspective. And it's amazing how many times I've seen migrations happen where people think it's a lift and shift. So people think everything I had here in the structure that it's in, I can move it to my new house in exactly the same structure, in exactly the same rooms, and it will just work. And 99% of the time, it doesn't work because you haven't done that mapping exercise. You haven't thought about the structure of your new home. You haven't thought about the stuff you don't actually need, and you end up buying a new house or a new system that isn't fit for purpose because you haven't planned properly. And so all of these things that are so relevant to Chris's house move with his wife are really, really relevant from a migration perspective too.
100%.
Totally. It's really important to kind of recognize, like, and this is very true when you move in house, that like it's a really good opportunity to look at the things that you've got and say, do I actually want these? Do I want them in the same way? Do I want to change them in some way? And get rid of the things that you don't. And the same is really true if you're implementing a new system or a new solution from a data perspective. You've got that opportunity to kind of really clean your data, get to a really solid start point and a great foundation, so you'll get good results out of your implementation of your new system or whatever it is. But then to tie it back to the conversation about data quality, you've then got to stay on top of that. You've got to put some processes in place to stay on top of that, to keep getting that value out.
And let's also not forget the help that you need during this process, right? Nobody would attempt really to move from one house to the next without getting some kind of support. It might be your family, it might be your friend with a van, you might hire a moving company, you might even hire people that pack your stuff and unpack it in your new place. And then you can pay for any number of those services. It's the same with the migration, right? We see so many organizations that try and do that part of it themselves, and it takes ages, or they get it wrong, or they break something because they haven't thought about it. Whereas when we support our clients doing that, because we've done it 100 times before, we've got the safety belts, we've got the van, which is the tool. We can take that stuff and we can move from one place to the next, and we know how to do that in a way that stops breakages. And then we allow our clients to focus on the stuff that they want to focus on, right? They can paint the walls, or they can, go shopping for some new placemats, or whatever it is that excites them. Don't let them worry about the moving aspect of it. Let them worry about designing their house. And yeah, I think it's really relevant.
Definitely. And I think there's obviously, I know we talked about this being the foundation aspect. There's also the fact that when you move house, your data governance has to change as well, right? Because if you've got a bigger house and more rooms, or if you've got a different type of house, right? You might have lived in a house before that was 1 story, and then you move to a house that's got 3 stories, right? And there's different codes, and there's going to be different ways of doing things. And so the governance also has to be taken in consideration. So all of this, all pieces together and forms that complete thing. No, definitely. I think from my side, I think this has been, it's really interesting. And like I said, I know I kind of joked that how many analogies can you squeeze out, but I think there is, I think it really helps to kind of contextualize some of the stuff that, that we do.
It's so prevalent.
It really does make sense. So if anybody's, just quickly, Chris, I would say if anybody who's watching has got any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A, by the way, while we're still talking.
Yeah, please. And I was just going to say that, I think when we get into the world of data, and we actually get in systems and data, we are afforded, because of our, Amplify's perspective of the world, where we come at it first from data governance of what is good, like what is the state of things, who own things, what are the decision makers, and then once we've defined what good is, and then we can start measuring against good, we apply quality rules. And if migration is necessary because we're able to introduce a system, or help improve data even within a system, that could be considered migration. We start going through the activities. Like, we have this really objective perspective that we're able to bring to organizations. But there's a lot of stakeholders that are impacted, and so change is difficult. It's super difficult, and so in our analogies, there's not as much insidious things going on behind the scenes, but when we're engaging with customers frequently, the data model is the way it is because the system requires it to be there, and it's required to be that way because this process that's been there for 20 years that they can't afford to change necessitates it to be that way. And those are the things that we kind of need to start figuring out in order to help build that roadmap forward. So it kind of sounds simple when we talk about it in the home analogy, but that's really just to frame it up. We completely respect the fact that what you're dealing with every day is order of magnitude more complicated.
Definitely a few more stakeholders involved than your typical house move, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, guys, I think we've not had any questions so far from the audience. I can't think of. I think if we try and cover any more here, we're going to start making some terrible analogies and trying to shoehorn lots of different analogies in. I think
we've got this waffle maker. Now bear with
me. But I really appreciate it. And I think it's been really good to kind of do this because, like I said, I think when you put context and when you make the things that we do seem relatable to kind of everyday things, it's what we do without it's a very complex thing, right? And data management, data quality, data governance, all those things can be very complex things. But I think if you simplify them down and you have the right people, like Aaron said, you have the right people helping you, those processes can become they can become manageable, and you can have a data house that you do love and want to live in, or you can have a data house that you love and live in and you outgrow and you need to move to another house that you want to love and live in. And I think that's what it's all about. I really love the point. I think probably my favorite takeaway from this is it has to be livable, right? It has to be done for a good reason, and it has to be something that you can actually manage, and isn't just a show home 7 days a week. So yeah. So, guys, unless there's anything else any of you guys have got to add, I just want to say thank you all for taking the time out today and going through this. Like I said at the start of the call, we can help solve lots of these challenges. On a serious note, whether it's data governance, data quality, whether you're looking to implement any MDM or PIM solutions, Amplify can do all of those things for you and can be that trusted help. So, if you do have any of those problems and want to come talk to us, you know where we are. We can give you the data house of your dreams. That's probably the cheesiest way I can end this call. So.
Thanks, Elliot. Really appreciate it.
Cheers,
All right,
Elliot.
guys. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.